It now.
We are live streaming.
You can get a countdown pattern. We can do 3, 2, 1 live.
We are live.
I'll share this link now, yeah?
Yep.
Hello, Mr. Rico Perez.
Hi there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yep, 100% clear. So we haven't admitted people yet. So yeah, just a brief introduction. Hello, I'm moderator for today's session. My name's Eljo. I'm a second year studying experimental psychology.
Very nice meeting
And,
you, Eljo.
Nice to meet you too. It looks like you're out of space today, in space today.
It's a wishful thinking.
Yeah, you want to be down here during the pandemic.
Yeah, I know. Especially
Exactly.
here, Manila's not really the best place to be in right now. But
Yeah.
so far, so good. We're keeping safe. And have you guys been vaccinated? Not yet. But anyway, you guys are not high risk.
Yeah,
It's people like me who are high risk. Because I'm older.
Young at heart.
Yeah.
So we have a few people coming in the waiting room. Should we admit them now, or should we just start admitting? Oh yeah, sorry, Mr. Miko Perez, how would you like us to refer to you?
You can call me Miko or whatever. Yeah, I'm fine with Miko. That's fine.
Great, thank you. Is that okay if we start now then? We start letting people in.
Sure. Yeah.
So do you have slides to present?
Yes, I do. But yeah, I can share it later once. Yeah. Yeah.
How should we do it, Jella? Should we? Okay, people are flooding in.
So can you tell me which, so the scripts that I see on the screen? So of course I know welcome, Salamat Datang. What's after Salamat Datang? Is that Nepali or?
Someone's gonna have to answer that for you. I don't know.
And
Okay,
then after,
I can try to answer that question. So yes, welcome is in English, selamat datang is in Malay or bahasa Indonesia. And I believe the third language is Lao, followed by Mandarin,
Chinese, yeah,
followed by Thai,
Thai,
followed by Vietnamese, and I believe Mabuhay is Tagalog.
yes,
And the second last one is I believe Khmer, and the last one is Burmese.
Myanmar, yeah.
Yeah.
So the last one is Khmer from
Khmer, Cambodian.
Cambodia. Cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So this is the Southeast Asian Society, is it, or the Asian Society?
It's a
Actually, yeah,
yeah,
Eljo.
so it's basically a collaboration with all the Southeast Asian societies. So it's a first time, I believe, event.
I see. Wow, that's great.
We wanted to make it something memorable.
And so you're mostly all university students. Are they also people doing their masters or their doctoral dissertation, or is it mostly university students?
Yeah, mainly we're all university students on the committee.
Yeah.
Should we start, guys, then?
I'll change slide to the house rules.
Okay, so let's start. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming to today's talk about financial technology startups in Southeast Asia. So today's event is part of a bigger event put together by a collaboration of the Oxford Southeast Asian Societies to showcase the world-class talent from their respective countries. So before we start, I'd like to go over the house rules. They're on the slides at the moment. So we encourage viewers to turn on their videos throughout the session, but of course it's not mandatory. Please ensure your audio is muted unless otherwise stated. And if you have any questions, don't be shy, put them in the text chat, or if you have a verbal question, then you can put it in the text chat, and then we will ask you to unmute during the interactive session after Miko's presentation. Yeah, and then a quick tip of using the speaker view for the best experience. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Eljo. I'm a second year studying experimental psychology at Oxford, and I will be moderating the talk today, and I'll be taking your questions from the audience for the interactive session. So today's speaker is Miko Perez. So a bit about Miko Perez. Miko Perez is a founder and CEO of the financial technology company Ayana, a leading provider of digital commerce and payment services for online and mobile communities, especially the unbanked. Prior to leading Ayana, he was a director of finance and business development at Chica, an internet-based instant messaging application, which was acquired by PLDT, Philippines' leading broadband and digital services provider. Prior to this, he was an investment manager at New Century, where he managed private equity on the behalf of Soros Fund Management, LLC, and several institutional investors. He was also an investment banker at JP Morgan Chase in San Francisco, where he advised technology, media, and telecom ventures. Having begun his career as a community organizer and agile educator, helping strengthen social enterprise in the Philippines, he remains actively involved in initiatives that encourage social entrepreneurship and sustainable development in emerging markets. Miko has a BSc in management with honors and a BA in development studies with honors and award for excellence from the Ateneo, the Manila University, and the MBA from Harvard Business School. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the spotlight over to Miko Perez, who's going to be talking to you a bit about his story and Ayana as a startup.
Thank you very much, Eljo. Very nice meeting you all. Very nice to meet young people who are from the region, and I may not be able to say everything welcome in every language, but at least with mabuhay, selamat datang, welcome, ni hao, and that's it. Or sawadika. That's probably that's all I can say. So very nice meeting you all. As Eljo mentioned, my name's Miko Perez. I am Filipino, and I am based here in Manila, the Philippines. I'm the founder and CEO of Ayana, where it's a fintech company. So I wanted to share a little bit more about my journey. Maybe looking back many years to when I was sitting in your shoes, sitting in your seats, studying. So this was a long time ago before you were born. So I grew up in a I would say a middle class family in the Philippines. You know, we were not very wealthy, but we were also not very poor. Parents were educated overseas, and so I was the youngest of five. And growing up in the Philippines back then, there was no internet, no Google, no nothing. But so at that time, I was sort of like this was in 1988, more than 30 years ago, when I was in university in Manila. At the time, the Philippines has just become a democracy from many years of authoritarian rule. So everyone, young people then were like were very much sort of inspired to do something for the country. And so in the Philippines, there's a saying: when you squeeze coconut milk, uh, when you squeeze the coconut meat to come up with coconut milk, the first squeeze is always the best. It's the sweetest, the tastiest. So back then, I said, okay. Uh, so the first few years of my career, I gave to helping build sort of people's organizations, cooperatives, etc. Instead of joining, let's say, an investment bank or a big bank or a multinational company, I decided to spend my first 3 years teaching in the rural areas of the Philippines with farmers, with fisher folk communities, etc. So, having done that, it was a great experience. Back then, when you're young, and uh I didn't really care about making money, just wanted to just enjoy. And then the Philippines is I'm a scuba diver, so I enjoyed going out into the countryside to go scuba diving, etc. So I enjoyed that for a while, but obviously after a while I realized, how do you help the communities in the rural areas in the Philippines? And I figured, if you build businesses in the rural areas, provide jobs, etc., then that's probably the best way for you to help develop these communities in the rural Philippines. Back then, and even up to now, the rural areas are the ones that are poor and need a lot of like sort of support when it comes to increasing livelihood. So I ended up at the age of maybe 24, starting a few agribusinesses in the Philippines. I never really thought about being a banker or going to Harvard Business School or etc. I wanted to just build something. So I took some money from my family and I built like a aquaculture company. We were raising fish and shrimp, etc., crabs, all sorts of seafood. And then we also built like a processing company to export seafood. So by the time I was maybe 26 or 27, I had like 1,000 people working for me. We had five or six processing plants all over the Philippines and some of the islands in the Philippines. If you don't know, the Philippines is an archipelago like Indonesia, so lots of islands, 7,007 islands. So we had five processing plants, and we were employing 1,000 people. So I was actually very happy doing that. And my joke was, most of the people working in my company then were women, because they were the ones that are processing the fish, the shrimp, etc., the seafood products. And so we had 1,000 women who were basically armed with knives. So I thought, oh, this is really a good preparation for marriage, because when you're surrounded by women with knives, that's probably good preparation for marriage. So when I was around 27, it was my father's birthday, and asked him, "Hey, Dad, what do you want for your birthday?" And he said, "I want one of my sons to go to Harvard Business School." So I come from a family of bankers, people who my brothers are all investment bankers and traders in Wall Street, very successful in the finance business, in the finance and investments. So here I was, fish farmer, seafood processing. I was happy working in small cities of I had a house in a small city in the Philippines. I was about to get married. But when my father said, "Hey, why don't you? I want one of my sons to go to Harvard Business School," I said, "How can I say no, right?" So I did apply. by that time, my brain was kind of rusty because I haven't been in school for a long time. I was away, I was working already for like 6 or 7 years, but I applied and I got accepted to Harvard, and so it kind of opened up a world for me. Um, and I was surrounded by very smart, very talented people, investment bankers, management consultants, product managers, software engineers, etc., from some of the best companies in the world. And here I was, a fish farmer. I really felt like a fish out of water in Harvard Business School. But because of that, it really opened my eyes to the possibilities. And at that time, this was around the year 2000, 21 years ago. That was just when the internet was starting, right? So I decided, you know what, I need to kind of make over myself, and from being a fish farmer in agribusiness, I decided to work in Silicon Valley. And for 2 to 3 years, all I did was I worked for a bank in Silicon Valley called JP Morgan. It was started as a small bank called Hamburg and Quist, but it was acquired by JP Morgan eventually. And so all I did was try to learn as much as I can about technology. And so then I went back to the Philippines, and decided to do something. I ended up working for my family again, as we had some businesses in the Philippines. And then at the same time, I had a friend who also went to Harvard Business School, who wanted to start a mobile messaging startup. This was before the days of the smartphone, before WhatsApp or Telegram or Viber or Line. And so we were doing a lot of mobile value added services, messaging on, and that business grew actually. And we sold it, as Eljo said, it was called Chica. We sold it, we made a bit of money. And I said, with the money I made from that sale, I decided to start Ayana. So Ayana is, and maybe now I can tell you a little bit about Ayana. I'll share my screen. Let's see. So when I started Ayana, this was 10 years ago, I wanted, and can you see my screen? Oh, so it's loading now.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
It's still loading.
Yeah, still loading.
Yeah. So I started Ayana. I figured, so now I know something about finance, I know something about technology, and I also know about, I've worked with communities in the Philippines. So I said, wouldn't it be cool if I made a company that would combine my experience and knowledge with finance and technology to help build better communities? So back then, uh, all this thing about impact investing and, triple bottom line wasn't that mainstream yet. So people thought I was kind of crazy, right? But how do you make money at the same time you try to help people? It seems like a contradiction, right? So, but we decided to persevere. So we created a company. Back then it was called e-commerce, but now more fashionably it's called fintech now, right? But pretty much the same thing. It's digital commerce and payments. So our goal really was to, and then we realized in the Philippines and also in other emerging markets in Asia, where you're from, uh, back then 10 years ago, people didn't have access to financial services. So a lot of people had either didn't know how to borrow money or couldn't even send money back to their home country. The Philippines particularly has a big diaspora from all over the world. Like even in the UK, where you are now, the National Health Service, there's a lot of Filipino nurses, and they work overseas, 12 million of them, and they send money back to the Philippines to support their families. So we start, my partners and I started, why don't we solve these problems? How do you use technology to make it easier for people to support their families? And so we launched first a product called Senda.com, which is our first product we launched. And our goal was, we wanted to make it easier for Filipinos living overseas to send goods and services back to their families in the Philippines. Think about it. It's like e-commerce, very similar to Bukalapak or any of these e-commerce sites now. But we were targeting Filipinos overseas, which is up to now, it's still running, still a profitable part of our business. It's actually growing, particularly because of COVID. It continues to grow. But back then, 10 years ago, we realized that a lot of Filipinos overseas didn't have credit cards, so they couldn't pay for their purchases on Senda. So we decided to create, and then there was a Filipina lady working in Korea. So back then, the average monthly spend was like $15. People would spend $15 a month on our site. But there was this Filipina living in Korea, working in Korea, who was spending $1,000 on our site. So she was an anomaly. So we decided to reach out to her, said, "Hey, thank you for your business. We really appreciate that you are spending so much on our website because obviously we make more money, right?" And we asked her, "But by the way, how come you're spending so much on our website?" And she goes, "Well, actually, it's not for me. But what happens is apparently she works for a company in Korea, and there are a lot of other Filipinos who work there and who don't have credit cards. So they ask her to buy things for her to send to their families in the Philippines, and that gave us an idea. What if we create sort of like another service that allows people to collect payments from from other people overseas, so that these people who don't have credit cards or unbanked can actually buy things. So we created another software called Send the Direct, and this Send the Direct, which we launched in March 2011, became like a big hit. It's like it really just basically grew, and in the most unlikely place. We thought first we were gonna go, find more agents because Send the Direct is like agent based, meaning someone's actually doing the transactions for other people, so that the agent was gonna be overseas, like in Italy, the UK, Spain, or the US, or Singapore, or Hong Kong. But it grew within the Philippines, and well, even now, the biggest business is actually in the Philippines. And so that app, as you call it now, called Send the Direct, is probably are the ones that are basically paying our bills and growing. And we launched different versions of this. Called one is called Send the Remit, uh, and um, and this one basically these are the products that are really growing our business. And now we're launching more products. One is called Kaya in the Philippines, and another one called Asira in Indonesia. Basically, think of it as a mobile financial services super app where people can use it to make payments, remit money, pay their bills, top up their airtime or pulsa as they call them in Indonesia, and then they can also access loans, also insurance, and eventually start doing retail investing, similar to what you would do, let's say, with Robinhood or Revolut. So that's basically what's Ayana. I mean, I can tell you a little bit more about the macro part. The reason, so we started in the Philippines, but our goal really is to become present in 4 countries in Asia: India, Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And why? Because the middle class is really where the growth is in the world. As I said, the global middle class is adding 5 people a second, maybe a little bit slower now because of COVID, but the trend line is actually very positive for the growth of the middle class. And 85% of that will come from Asia. And then and everyone is already projecting that basically this emerging class is the one that will power the world economy for the next 3 decades. So we decided to focus on these 4 large emerging markets: India, Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam. What's common with all these 4 is that the median age of these countries are still very low, very young. So India's 27 years old, Philippines 24, Indonesia's 29, Vietnam is 30. So what does that mean? They're like you guys. The median age is like more your age than my age, and you are just starting your journeys. When you graduate from Oxford, when you start working, that's when you start your financial journey. Normally, probably you get your first credit card, and then you start borrowing to pay your bills. When you get your flat, or whatever or you go back to your home country and you work there. And then eventually, when you get older, you might end up wanting to have a family. So then you'll have to buy insurance or pay for your children's education, blah, blah, blah. So that is happening on a massive scale across Asia. And that's why we're very excited about what we're doing, is because we're making it easier for these financial service providers um, to so I mean, and the thing is, while this demand is growing, the gap is so big between the demand and the supply. So for example, most people still transact in cash in these four markets, even though, yes, over the past 24 months, probably particularly because of COVID, the amount of transactions being done digitally is growing, but still the majority is still in cash. And then for remittances, a lot of it's still being done in cash in the Philippines and in India. Now, also for SMEs, small medium enterprise, in all these markets, it's very hard to raise financing, especially now because of COVID. So a lot of the banks, the lenders are not willing to lend. But even before COVID, if you're a small business owner, if you have a small, let's say you have a warung in Indonesia or a kirana in India or a sari-sari store in the Philippines, very hard to get financing to grow your business. Even more so if you're just a consumer, if you want to get a salary loan, it's very expensive. In fact, it's very, how would you say, predatory, meaning to borrow money short term, the interest rates being charged very high. And the reason why I think that happens is because there's not enough supply to meet the demand. So when there's not enough supply to meet the demand, the people who can supply can charge whatever they want, right? So I need to borrow money, but there's not enough people willing to. And partly because of these are very small transactions, and these are mostly unbanked people. If I'm a lender, it's very hard for me to gauge whether someone's credit worthy or not. So same thing with insurance. In most developed countries like the UK, where you are now, insurance penetration as a percentage of GDP is actually closer to 10%. In most of these four countries I mentioned, insurance penetration is more like 2%. So it's like basically there's still a 5x sort of how would you say, upside before we can reach the level of insurance penetration that the developed countries have. So in other words, these emerging markets in Asia are still very much underinsured. So same thing with so even for retirement savings, obviously that's not a concern for you guys. You're just starting, but like in the Philippines, only 1% of the population has some kind of retirement account. So no one's saving yet. So there's a massive opportunity to provide these financial services to this growing middle class. So so how do we do it? So just to give you an idea, in the Philippines, we've been growing steadily over the past 4 or 5 years. What we do is like I call it a three-layer cake, like a wedding cake. We have an open banking platform. It's a fancy term. Basically, we just have a bunch of APIs to connect financial service providers, banks, insurers, lenders, etc., to connect them. And we have an omni-channel distribution system. Again, a very fancy term. Basically, what it's saying is that we can reach customers over the web, over the phone, or over an agent network or network of agent. And then we're now using data science because we're accumulating a lot of data from transactions and from the sensors. The primary sensor we're using is Android because I would say over 90% of emerging market people in these markets use an Android phone. iPhone is not as popular, of course. You probably know this. So, and because of that, we're getting a lot of data about people's behavior, how often they pay, how much they pay for their bills, how much they pay for their airtime, their pulsa, etc. And that actually we use machine learning to understand customers better so that we can predict their behavior and offer them products and services that are relevant to their needs and aspirations. Um, so uh, So COVID was quite a big tragedy. It was not something that you wish for, but we benefited because of COVID, because there was this scramble to digitize. People wanted to become more contactless, right? So people started getting wallets, etc. So in the Philippines, our volume grew 8x with very little marketing. And then across the past several years, from 2015, when we first started this business, we basically grew 8x from 2020. Just from 2020 between 2019 and 2020, we grew 8x in volume, and we're continuing to grow, even even if siguro we all take a break, we all go hang out at the beach and scuba dive for the rest of the year, we'll probably double volume now, even without doing anything more than what we're doing. And we would have probably broken even already, but except that we're also investing in launching in Indonesia and India and Vietnam. Yeah. So how do we do it? Basically, it's app-based. That's the reason why we grow so fast, right? Everything's app-based. Just download the app and bingo, we can do that. So we basically covered the Philippines we're covering the Philippines with agents. So we started out with around 4,000 agents at the beginning of 2020. Now we're closer to 10,000. Our goal is to get to 40,000 agents in the Philippines. I think there are some of you here from Indonesia, right? So in Indonesia, there's a company called PayFaz. I don't know if you've heard of it. So they're similar to what we do, uh, PayFaz. So we have an agent network in the Philippines, and at the same time, that's the distribution side of things. So these are the type of agents who use our app. These are what you call the mom and pop stores in the Philippines. We call them sari-saris. In Indonesia, they're called warung. In India, they're called kirana. So these are really the small mom and pop shops by the roadside, etc. And in most emerging markets, it's pretty much the same. I was just talking to a friend in Nigeria. He said it's the same thing. He talked to someone in Mexico. It's the same thing. Uh, so basically, we're using them as basically branchless banking. I mean, so now you can do your and that's just on the agent side of things. So we're expanding. We're introducing new functionalities on our mobile POS device, etc. Um, and the reason is, we found out that there's a big gap, like ATM. You know what? You guys know what an ATM machine is, right? So there's a big gap. So if you look at more developed countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, there's like 50 to 60 ATMs per 100,000 adults. While in Indonesia, it's a little low. In Philippines, it's very low, only 30 ATMs per 100,000. Vietnam's still low. India's also very low. And so we launched a micro ATM. It's like an Android device that you can stick your ATM. So we're now working with both the banked and the unbanked. Yeah. So that's what we basically are doing. So we started out with a more agent-based approach going through in 2019. It's really more agent-based. From 2020 to 22, we're adding more of the banks on our platform. As we build our distribution capability, we're adding the banks. And then come this year until 2023, we're going straight to the consumers already. So we've launched in Indonesia. So we branded our product, our B2C product in Indonesia as Asira. Our Indonesian team said that that's more appropriate culturally for Indonesia than Kaya. Asira is actually basically as a sort of open banking platform where we already are live in Indonesia, and we're helping lenders reach their borrowers faster. So I'll give you an example. In Indonesia, we work with one of the largest bus companies in Indonesia. It's called Damri. They provide the bus service between Jakarta to Bandung to Surabaya, Semarang. And so the employees of Damri have a credit union. Before, it would take 2 weeks to process a loan. a small loan of like maybe $200 to $300, 2 weeks. Because of our platform, they can get their loan in within 15 minutes. So it's a big difference, and we're doing that with other banks and lenders in Indonesia. So I'm learning new some places I've never heard before, like Pontianak, Palembang, Jayapura, and so I'm learning all these places in Indonesia, and also learning about India, also learning about Vietnam. So basically, that's what we're doing. So what we did in the Philippines, we're doing in Indonesia, India, and Vietnam. Yep. I will end there, and then maybe you guys have more time for to ask questions.
Great, thank you so much. That was really interesting. It's really cool to see how Iona is developing as a company. So maybe I'll start off with one question, asking about the future of Iona, and yeah. So what I ask is, given the increasing traction of cryptocurrencies globally, especially in Southeast Asia, how do you think Iona will have to evolve over the next 5 years, or whether that is even relevant for Iona's business model?
Oh, actually, that's a very good question. As a matter of fact, um, we're now processing a lot of transactions. We call it fiat to crypto, crypto to fiat transactions. So, are you guys familiar with Binance? Binance is a crypto trading platform. It's Chinese. There's also Abra. There's also Coinbase, etc. So, what we have found is that even though Binance is not present in the Philippines, or Abra is another crypto trading platform, a lot of Filipinos are already trading. They download the app and they find a way to put fiat, money into their trading account, and they start trading crypto. And now, when they make a profit, they send it back to the Philippines using. And so we are now one of the partners of these crypto trading platforms to convert fiat peso to crypto, so that they can start trading in crypto. And then we can, after they, if they want to convert their crypto back into fiat, we are also processing that. So the volumes are growing actually. We don't even market, but it's starting to be, it's becoming a big part of our business as well. So I do believe that, and maybe a more sort of a long-term prediction, I really think there's going to be a convergence between crypto and fiat. Crypto will become increasingly regulated, like the same way they regulate fiat, but more or less, eventually people will start using it. So yeah, so that's my answer. So we are evolving. It's the same thing for us. It doesn't matter whether it's rupiah, whether it's peso, whether it's rupee, or Vietnamese dong. It could also be Bitcoin, could be Circle, it could be Tether or Ripple. For us, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Basically it's electronic value. So what we do is I'll make it easy for people to trade into these sort of these currencies. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Fantastic answer. So we have a question from the audience, Parin. He asks, being one of the first companies to venture into digital financial services, how did you aim to provide security to your customers that was on par with traditional banking services?
Yes, I mean, we are, I mean, eh, when you're in the digital realm, people will really try to rip you off. It's a fact of life in our business that hackers are going to try to steal people's money, etc. So there are a lot of techniques. Basically it's a never-ending battle against bad people. So we have people. So our engineers have to build the code very securely. Also, our business processes have to be such that we can protect not just the value that is stored in the accounts of our customers, but also their data. So we have to comply with a lot of standards, like in Europe. You're familiar with the GDPR. Are you familiar with GDPR, the General Data Privacy Rights? So it's not just value, but it's also the data, the personally identifiable data of people that we have to protect. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that we have to do. So we have compliance people just focusing on data protection and cybersecurity, uh, and over time we learn ways to of building stuff that protect our customers, because that's really the we cannot lose the trust of our customers. Maybe just to give one example, because that's a question of one of the students, is that, are you familiar with 2FA, two-factor authentication? So basically, when I don't know if you've tried using your credit card or or let's say you did an online transaction, and then it will send an SMS to your mobile phone. That's what you call two-factor authentication. So that's one way that we can prevent fraud or people stealing things from you, is through two-factor authentication. Because apart from your password, which is one factor, the second factor is you actually have to confirm that you own your mobile phone. So that's just one of the things we have to do to protect our customers' data and money, right? So yeah, so that's that's just one. Thi- we can talk about a lot more. It will take a one whole day if you want to talk about the other things that we have to do. But that's just one, yeah. But we do have to do all of that, and we have to comply with some of these security standards. Yeah. Okay. There are more questions.
Yeah, so we can go through them.
Wei Jun has a question about how do we reach out to banks and insurers. Okay. How do we sell our idea to them? The good news is a lot of the legacy banks uh, are actually panicking now. Why? Because all these fintech companies are there to eat their lunch, right? So a lot of the legacy banks, like for example in Indonesia, they have what you call the BPDs, Bank Penganggaran Daerah. These are state-owned banks. Each province in Indonesia has one. So they're a state-owned bank. They have like millions of depositors, but they don't have access to talent and technology. Why? All the smart kids like you guys will probably not want to work for a state-owned bank, right? You'll probably want to have your own fintech startup, your own hot startup, and your own Gojek or Bukalapak, or so. So what we do is, instead of trying to fight these legacy banks, we help them actually compete with the fintechs. But we also work with the fintechs. So, for example, in the Philippines, there are digital banks who are launching. In fact, 6 digital banks are launching in the Philippines, and so they need us because they need people. Same thing as what I mentioned about Binance, right? They need these our network of agents so that people can actually put money into their bank accounts, because these digital banks have no branch, no ATMs, right? We provide the branchless banking services for them. So actually, it's very easy. We don't even have to sell because they need us. They actually come to us. We're actually very busy because everyone's coming to us now wanting to digitize, and we actually need to hire more people because we don't even have to market. People just go to us because they need us so that they can actually transform their businesses digitally, whether they are a legacy bank, meaning a traditional bank, or a challenger or a fintech that's coming in. Yeah. Next. So our goal really is to be friends with everyone. Whether you're a big bank like maybe like BCA or Mandiri in Indonesia, or BDO in the Philippines, and then or whether you are a new bank that's coming in or a rural bank, we don't care. As long as you're legit, you're licensed, we will work with you. We'll provide the open banking platform for you. So okay, next question from Pawit, no? Pawit, you're from Thailand? Yeah.
Yeah.
As you look to expand to other, which one do you think will present the most difficult challenge to overcome? Well, Um, each market has their own challenges. So, for example, Indonesia, we're not. I don't speak Bahasa, and but okay. In terms of competition is there everywhere. So it's foolish to think that there will be no competition. So we expect that in Indonesia or India or Vietnam, we will encounter competition. So we have to have a unique selling proposition, and and so so we build products that we believe only we can do well or provide well. So that's one. Uh, to be honest, if I rank things in terms of level of difficulty, I would say in terms of ease of doing business so far, it would be Indonesia. I actually believe it's easier to do business in Indonesia than even my home country, the Philippines. Sad to say. And in fact, we joke. It's so hard to do business in the Philippines that that song, if you can make it there, you will make it everywhere. So we can succeed in the Philippines. It's easier now to go to Indonesia or to India. To be honest, I don't know much about Vietnam, and of course, I don't speak the language. And maybe the regulatory framework there's a little not quite as set as perhaps Indonesia and India. So I would say we expect to have more challenges in Vietnam. But what we do is we partner with a very established Vietnamese investor group who know their way around their market so that we don't have to go through the learning curve. By partnering with them, we can actually basically avoid making mistakes that will cost money and time, right? Yeah. Yeah. But to answer the question, I think Indonesia, in terms of interesting things, I love Indonesia. I am fascinated by Indonesia. I'm also excited about India because it's a massive market. Vietnam, I think, is a little more of an unknown for me because of the language, etc. But that's why I think Vietnam will be the most challenging for us. Okay, next question from Neo. Ooh, Neo. Wow, I haven't heard these terms in a long time. Given the low equity risk premium environment, okay, the rising. What is this? Okay, so you're saying basically, money is cheap, cash is everywhere. There's so much. Is that? I think Neo. That's what you mean, right? There's so much cash floating around, so much liquidity. That's why equity markets are crazy. Like if you go to the U.S., a lot of the highly valued stocks actually are not even making money, right? So is that sustainable? Well, first of all, I think it's crazy. I think these companies are overvalued. I mean, when you have zero revenue and zero income, and then you're valued at, let's say, $200 million, obviously the laws of corporate finance don't apply, right? So it's crazy. But but I mean, markets tend to be like that. It goes fluctuates from super bullish, irrational exuberance, and then it's gonna be a correction, and it's gonna go down, and then we're gonna meet somewhere in the middle. But to be honest, now this is really a very strange time. Can you imagine in the middle of a global pandemic, equity markets at the all-time high, and in spite of the fact that most countries probably are in a recession, right? Contraction. So you don't expect companies to grow. But even then, equity market's crazy. Why is that? People are pumped. Basically, the rich countries have negative interest rates because they're not growing. So they're just printing cash to stimulate their economies. And then now with the pandemic, for example, the US, they have a $2 trillion stimulus package. That's all gonna basically dumped into the economy. Basically, people are getting $600 or $1,200, even they don't do anything, right? Just to stimulate spending to jumpstart the economies again. So, is it sustainable? I don't think so. But the markets are very complex. There's a lot of factors, so I wouldn't want to predict when the correction will happen. But if you're planning to become an investment manager, Neo, I would just say that try to diversify. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. So we never know whether the market will correct or not, right? So might as well put it in some. If you're taking portfolio allocation theory now, think about putting stuff in tech, maybe put some stuff in agri, put some stuff in other so negatively correlated assets. Yeah. Okay. Next.
So we have a question from the audience actually.
Okay.
By Matthew Chu or Nikki Chu. Hi Miko, do you think cashless payment method could substitute cash payment in the future or maybe post-COVID era?
I think so. I think that's actually I would say that the long-term trend line is a lot of these markets in Asia will become, I wouldn't say cashless, but they will be cash light. So even if you look at China is an extreme example because basically it became a cashless society. But there's a reason why that is. It's a communist country, right? So the Communist Party can dictate everyone has to use WeChat Pay and Alipay. If you don't use it, we'll shoot you in the head, whatever. We'll throw you in jail. So you have no choice. But countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, and India are democracies, right? So people still want a choice. So I think what's going to happen, and I think even countries like Japan will be surprised. Japan is still pretty much a cash economy. Outside of the metropolitan areas, if you go to rural Japan, it's still pretty much a cash economy. Obviously, go to Tokyo, Shibuya, Shinjuku, then everything's in cash, right? In electronic. But outside of the metropolitan areas, still very much a cash economy. I think even the UK, there's still, of course, you guys are more the digital natives, right? I mean, you guys are the mobile first, mobile only generation. Most likely, you guys are already using some form of electronic payment system. But I think I wouldn't say that it's going to be 100% cashless, but definitely it will be cash light. I would maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, things will become more digital. Yeah. And that's being accelerated by COVID, by the way, because people don't want to touch money now because they're scared of getting sick, right? Yeah. Okay.
Definitely. We probably only have time for one more question. I have a question from Jella. Hi, Miko. You mentioned that growing up post-martial law shaped your desire to help the country. Do you think the challenge of the pandemic has potential to do the same thing for young Filipinos and other Southeast Asians today?
Well, I hope so. It's hard for me to speak on behalf of young Filipinos because I'm certainly not in that age bracket anymore. But I hope that you guys, you're the kids, right? It's really your turn now. I mean, as I said, the median age in these countries are below 30, right? So I'm actually the outlier already. You guys are right smack in the sweet spot. So this pandemic creates, of course, it's a tragedy of enormous proportions, right? I mean, people are dying, loved ones are dying, etc. But at the same time, I think there is an opportunity for what they call as the Great Reset. Hopefully now, your generation, or I would call the Greta Thunberg generation, you guys are probably, hopefully, more realize that things can't continue the way they are. Like people can't just continue spewing greenhouse gases and destroying forest cover and destroying coral reefs and fishing out the world's resources. Because at the end of the day, that's I think one reason why we have the pandemic is because all these like zoonotic viruses are jumping from bats to humans, right? Because I don't know what happened, but maybe we're intruding on their habitat. That's why. So the expectation is there's going to be more of these zoonotic viruses that will jump to humans, and then so we're going to expect that. So I really hope that young people like you guys can really have a can create a consensus about working for a greener planet, at the same time more inclusive planet. And I think the problem also is you know when you have societies that are there's the income inequality is so stark. I mean, you got multi-billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, and then half the world is actually just dirt poor, eventually that creates problems of social conflict, etc. And you know what's happening in the US now. So it's up to you guys. I think we kind of screwed up. My generation screwed up. I think we didn't. We're not leaving you with a better planet than that we started with in 1988 when I graduated from university. So I apologize on behalf of my generation. So, but if you guys can, if more young people like you guys can really work together to come up with these solutions. Technology is amazing now. I mean, I think there's ways that we can bring down greenhouse gas emissions, create more inclusive economies. The reason why I built Ayana was I figured, wouldn't it be cool to create a business that was profitable but at the same time actually helps distribute wealth rather than concentrates wealth, right? So I want you guys to really use your imagination to come with these new ways of doing things that are, number one, environmentally sustainable, and number one, will lead to more inclusivity, you know. Because I think if we continue at the same path that we did before COVID, then there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering more. We're going to expect more pain and suffering in the future. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was really inspiring. Yeah, so that wraps up the first talk by Miko Perez on Ayana, the fintech startup. So we'll take a little break for 5 minutes, and then the next talk will start. It's by Top Jirayat on the startup BitCub. So yeah, thank you very much, Miko. I hope everyone enjoyed that.